Barry Morphew and his daughters finally broke their silence and gave an interview, and we're going to talk about some of the highlights of it in today's video. Hello Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa, which is right behind me, and Mr. Roscoe is there holding it down, currently licking himself, and my name is Paul. Like I said in the little intro, Barry Morphew, hello, finally broke his silence with his daughters, gave an interview, and we're going to talk about the highlights of that. Now, the reason why this is coming out, in my opinion at least, is because he has filed a $15 million lawsuit. Now, what we're going to do is, this video is not meant to go deep into the case and who Barry is and all that kind of stuff, but we are going to do like a very quick synopsis of it for those who are not familiar with it, and then we're going to review a few clips from the interview that he and his daughters gave. Okay, so Barry Morphew, he's 55 years old. He was charged back in May 2021 with the murder of his wife. Now, her name is Suzanne Morphew, 49 years old. She literally just seemingly vanished into thin air. She was on a bike ride in Salida, Colorado. This was on Mother's Day of 2020. As of this date, it is May 16th, 2023. Her body has never been found. But last year, the charges against him were like all of a sudden dropped. We'll get a little bit into it here in a minute. Without prejudice by the Assistant District Attorney Linda Stanley. Okay, now let's go a little bit deeper into a couple of things just to get us all on the same page, and then we'll get to those video clips. So as you see on the screen here, Morphew's case, it was scheduled for a full trial beginning May 1st, but then it was dramatically halted a week before, and prosecutors announced they were tossing the case. Now, this happened because the judge due to preside over the trial banned the prosecution from using a series of witnesses on the grounds of discovery violations, while police said they were close to finding Suzanne's remains and were waiting for the snow to melt. Now, the case was dismissed, like I said earlier, without prejudice, despite objections from the defense, which means it could still be refiled with should new evidence come to light. Her body has still not been found. Now, this is one of those cases where I really do feel like, yeah, the prosecution, there was a lot of stuff that really wasn't making sense the way it was going down. That being said, they can still file charges, and I'm very curious to see if that will ever come to be. Now, let's look at a couple of things about the lawsuit. So this article says, as a result of the defendant's conduct, Barry was charged, arrested, and prosecuted, and his property seized for a crime he did not commit, the lawsuit says. Now, as a result of the defendant's conduct, Barry spent 5 months in jail, approximately 6 more months were in GPS, with severe restrictions on his movement, and almost a year defending his against criminal charges. To this date, Barry's property remains in the CCSD's possession. The lawsuit claims that Morphew's name and reputation have been irreparably tarnished, and in Colorado and all around the country. Those named in the lawsuit, including Chaffee County, the Sheriff's Office and Board of Commissioners, 11th Judicial District Attorney Linda Stanley and her staff, and Colorado Bureau of Investigation and FBI agents. So, I mean, this is $15 million. This is a lot of money on the line. And again, I mean, if you followed this case, you know this is all over the place, right? So this lawsuit is going to be very interesting to see what comes of it. And to me, I'm also curious if this is going to make investigators like put a fire under their butt, whatever they have to do to find Suzanne's body. Because basically they're like, look, it wasn't that we didn't drop this because we felt like, oh, you know, he didn't do it or anything. Basically, they felt like their hands were tied and that they needed a body. They needed more evidence. They didn't have enough at that point to really get a conviction. Now, let's very quickly go over one thing that the prosecution did present, and this is in regard to Suzanne and some of the things that were going on, because it's going to kind of inform us a little bit more when we watch the clips we're going to watch. At a preliminary hearing in 2021, law enforcement officials presented to the court Suzanne's text message exchanges with her lover, in which she told him she had a fine night and was looking at houses for sale. When her husband came home from work that day, he found Suzanne sunbathing in the yard. She was sending pictures of herself to Libler via LinkedIn, which the couple had been using to communicate behind her husband's back. The court was then shown a photo of Suzanne that she had sent to Libler, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, that day, which depicted her laying on her front in a bikini and smiling. Barry would later tell investigators his wife looked drunk in that photo, which officials said was Suzanne's last proof of life. Okay, so now this is basically what was purported to have happened. Is this is going on? He comes home, he goes into a rage, and does whatever happens, and she's never seen from again. Now, again, before we even get into this stuff, y'all, this is all alleged. He has not been charged. In fact, they're obviously threw the case out, right? Now, it could come back to be. So just saying that because, I don't want to get in trouble, okay? But these are all my opinions. It's not fact. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not any of that stuff, okay? Now, that being said, let's go ahead and start watching some of these
Claiming
clips.
his life has been ruined
Macy
by
and Mallory are speaking exclusively to ABC News, claiming his life has been ruined by false accusations.
What have these last 3 years been like for you?
Very, very sad. Very confusing.
Just so traumatic.
Here's my thing on that. I don't live in their household. I don't know these people personally, so I don't know what their behaviors are like. I don't know anything like that. I would love for the behavior panel to analyze this interview, though. But that being said, one thing that I've always have found of interest in true crime cases that we look at are scenarios such as this, where one parent is left, who is alleged to have taken the life of the other, but it's in limbo. Where does that leave the family unit? What happens if the family unit says, yeah, you did this? Where do you go from there? And that type thing. And so I feel like that is a scenario going on here. Now, again, I don't know these people, so it's just my opinion. And we'll hear the girls in a minute say, they do not believe that they are standing by their father. However, communications that Suzanne had with friends and whatnot, which we'll see also, they kind of depicted a little bit of a different story, right? She sent out some very concerning text messages saying that, about Barry and the home life, and one of the daughters wanting her to, they should separate, and that type thing, and manipulation. So it makes you kind of question how they got around that. But again, if this is the only surviving parent at this point, that puts the girls in a very awkward situation. And also, we don't know the dynamic between them and Barry, right? I mean, he's saying he's innocent. So far, he's not been charged. He's not been found guilty. And so they might go with that. Again, we don't really know what's going on in the household. But something just doesn't feel right about it.
Did you have anything to do with the disappearance of your wife?
Absolutely not. It's very hurtful to lose your reputation and your integrity.
Okay, now we're going to play devil's advocate here on both sides of the fence with this one. So first of all, it's very odd to me that the first thing that came out of his mouth was, it's very hurtful about your reputation and integrity, this kind of stuff. Me on the sidelines on the sofa would have liked to have heard a comment about what happened to Suzanne. Where is my wife? Where is my children's mother? As opposed to a statement that is reverted back around to me. This is how I'm suffering because of this, if that makes sense. Now, devil's advocate here. We don't know how this was edited. It could have been, maybe he said that and then they threw this chunk in instead. I don't know. But again, either way, it doesn't sit right with me.
You never had a shred of doubt once you heard the evidence from law enforcement against your dad?
I've never had a shred of doubt.
Not one.
Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. So the girls are standing beside their father. That's their choice. That's their decision. Again, I'm not related to these people, so it's, not my battle, right? One thing this reminds me of is the Michael Peterson case. And if you remember that, the staircase made very famous by the documentary. And, Kathleen Peterson found dead at the bottom of the stairs. In the family, her biological daughter, they had a huge mixed family. Most of the children were Michael Peterson's, and 2 of them were adopted. The rest of them were his boys. And so basically, once evidence came out, her biological daughter was like, no, you totally killed my mother, and it split the family, right? And so then the rest of the kids are kind of left, well, what do you do, right? That's their biological father. And so watching the documentary over the years and kind of beginning to see where, especially the girls that he adopted from a woman who was found at the bottom of her stairs dead. That's a whole other part of that. But, this possible questioning, this possible wavering, because regardless of how you paint the picture, one has to sit here and have some very difficult conversations. And so with Barry and his daughters, there had to be some level of conversation. There had to be some moment where when they put their heads on the pillow, they would question, did Dad do this? Type of thing. And it's those moments that fascinate me to see how one might reason with themselves, in this. So let's continue.
Law enforcement, the DAs, believed that they had their guy, and they believe that there's a mountain of evidence against you. There's just not Suzanne's body.
They're wrong. They've got tunnel vision, and they looked at one person, and they've got too much pride to say they're wrong and look somewhere else.
These charges were dropped without prejudice, which means if authorities feel like there's more evidence, they could charge you again. Do you live with fear of that?
Well, I was innocent the first time they arrested me, so I'm sure it's possible. But I don't have anything to worry about. I've done nothing wrong.
I think one thing that throws me off, and this is why we desperately need the behavior panel, which he's done things on them before. I think it's just kind of like the way Barry talks and presents himself. And again, because I don't know him personally, that's where some of it just seems like, is this making sense? Am I believing this, right? Those are the feelings that it gives me. So that doesn't mean anything other than that's how I feel. Now, in this, where she's asking him about, well, what about if they come back? And, well, I was innocent the first time they got me. Again, and, it could be, I don't know, and that will be proven one day, maybe in court, because at this point, we don't have Suzanne's body, and something happened to her. She didn't disappear into thin air. And one thing that was going on with Barry, most of these circumstances, these situations, these investigations start from the inside and work their way out. And there is so much kind of just dicey circumstantial evidence with him. Now, it's unfortunate for the prosecution that they threw out all these witnesses and stuff, the judge did, because I could see where a lot of the stuff that Barry had as evidence, and when we started hearing the excuses that his defense was coming up with, I'm like, this is a lot of reasonable doubt for this stuff, even though it's totally suspicious, and so that's where I can see why they were probably like, we need her body. We need her body.
Was there any indication before she disappeared that something was amiss?
No.
Did you observe any fights, arguments, disagreements between your mom and your dad that concerned you before?
No.
Now, here's the thing, and this is what I was talking about. So, nope, nothing weird, nothing odd. Now, Suzanne was having an affair. Barry, there was evidence of him being involved in some different websites, stuff like that, which he explained away, of course. But all didn't seem like it was happy on the frontier. So let's watch a clip about some of those text messages.
Prosecutors offering texts which appear to show a strained marriage, Suzanne referring to Barry as Jekyll and Hyde, and just before she disappeared telling Barry, "I'm done." Suzanne confiding in a friend, "Macy and I had a very tough talk yesterday. She's weary of the tension here. She knows how he is toward me and almost begged me to divorce him. He's still pulling Mal in."
Okay, so here's my thing with that. That is, not a good text message, especially to hear the information that we're hearing now. And again, unfortunately, Suzanne's not here to tell her side of the story. This is what makes me, and I think a lot of the public, say, we don't get why this evidence says this, but this is what, these three are saying or whatever. Now, again, it's not my family. I don't live with them. I don't know what it's like, going on in the household. For all I know, maybe Barry and Suzanne hid their issues from the girl. I don't know. But it's this kind of contradicting things that has just, again, never really felt right.
We had a wonderful life, wonderful marriage. She was just so loving and giving and such a good mother.
Before her disappearance, Suzanne fighting cancer.
And I know that she was going through chemotherapy for the last couple of years before her disappearance, and I know she was going through some hard things and made some bad decisions.
What kind of bad decisions?
She was really having trouble with the chemotherapy and the drugs.
Okay. So this part too, I'm kind of like, okay. Now I get chemotherapy is, major, right? But this was such an odd answer, and it really wasn't an answer. Like what kind of behavior? Oh, she was having the chemo and the drugs. Okay. It just seemed very odd to me. And so again, was I there? No. What I feel like I'm reading between the lines is that the bad decisions and this and that is he's essentially saying, and again, this is me just interpreting this, she was kind of messed up in this chemo and going through a hard time, so she was, not really, in her right mind. This where this whole affair thing came from. But, we learned even from that the guy was supposed to testify, right? I mean, this was pretty hot and heavy. So, again, strange answers don't really feel right.
When you found out that Suzanne was having an affair, what was your first thought?
My heart was broke. My heart was broken. I didn't believe it.
What's been the hardest part?
Just not having Mom.
Not knowing.
It's really difficult, especially because of the lack of closure we have.
I mean, my question is this, like, what kind of conversations do you have at the dinner table? You know what I'm saying? Like, what kind of conversations are had? Like, this lack of closure, this and that. I mean, what is the answer? What is the answer? Now, if you followed this right in the beginning, like when he first, like on the scene, we found her bike. He had a mountain lion did it. This could have done, oh, that could have done. I mean, he had every excuse in the book for what could have happened to Suzanne, and very bizarre behavior, the whole 9 yards. So, I just question, what are their conversations like at home? What an elephant in the room to have to tip around, you know what I'm saying? So here's my thing. This is what I personally think will happen eventually with this case. I think, all that is in the dark will come to light eventually. God knows it could take decades, but it usually does. And we pray for that, because this is one of those where Suzanne needs justice, and whatever that means. Whether it's we find out, no, Barry had nothing to do with it, but, here we go over here, we've got the answer to it, then great, People need answers. Those who loved her need answers. This is so bizarre that she disappeared into thin air like that under the circumstances and under the things that were going on in the household at that time, and nothing has ever been found. It's very weird to me. I feel sorry for the girls. I feel like, what do you do? This is their father, that was their mother. They basically lost both parents because when he was in jail, well, now they have him back. What are the dynamics there? I don't know. And I feel like we'll learn that. I think it will take many years for us to get an answer to this, but I think eventually she will be found. Whether it's she's on the property somewhere, who knows? There's so much that could have happened with her remains by now, which is unfortunate. I think we will see charges brought against him again. I just don't know when it will be. I do not think that the prosecutor will say, oh, never mind, that was the thing. I think they'll get more evidence eventually. I'm not sure why the case was so bundled in the beginning, but clearly it was enough for a judge to be like, this ain't cool. And so there you go. So anyways, but again, these are just my opinions. I urge you to do your own research, come up to your own conclusions, drop it in the comments down below, and that's it. So again, let me know what you think. What did you think of this interview? Can we get the behavior panel to revisit this case with these, this little interview here? I think it would be nice. Anyways, until we find out what happens with Barry, what happened to Suzanne, where this is going, I'll see y'all soon here at the sofa. Be there, be square.